Welcome back to the Ravioli Theory, the podcast. I'm your host, Terrell Wilson, and I am thrilled to have you join us for episode 2. Today, we're going to dive into one of the most critical and exciting aspects of opening the Ravioli Theory, crafting a menu that celebrates global flavors.
And I'm Matt Lucas, your co-host. In this episode, we're going to take you behind the scenes of how we developed a menu that not only honors diverse culinary traditions, but also brings something fresh and innovative to the table.
We're going to talk about our guiding principles of staying true to one or the other, which means making sure each dish on our menu either sticks closely to tradition or respectfully introduces something new. It's a fine balance between authenticity and creativity.
We'll also dive into the research and experimentation that went into creating our dishes, from learning about the cultural significance of certain ingredients to testing countless flavor combinations. It's been a journey of discovery and sometimes trial and error.
And of course, we'll be sharing stories about some of our signature dishes, the cultural inspirations behind them, and how we manage to respect the traditions they come from, while still adding our own unique twist.
So, whether you're passionate about global cuisine, curious about the creative process, or just love good food, this episode is for you. Let's get started on the journey of crafting a menu that truly embodies the ravioli. Welcome back, everybody, to the Ravioli Theory, the podcast. That's all I got.
You know what? I'm not editing this out. We're going to keep it in.
This is pretty solid.
The whole point of this podcast is to be able to show everybody what's going on behind the scenes and in the background. And currently, Matt and I are having the weirdest days of our lives trying to do podcast episode number 2 because I can't read today and or stop laughing. So,
episode 1, I think really gave us just a false representation of what it was like to record podcasts. Because that one we did pretty quickly. This one's taken about 30 minutes just to get that 30-second intro. So
yeah,
we're figuring it out. We're getting there.
I can't read today. I'm going to blame it on the fact that yesterday was my birthday and I probably took a couple more drinks after everyone left that I probably shouldn't have. And I'm going to blame it on that. So what do we talk about today?
I mean, the episode title is Crafting the Menu. So I feel like that's probably our topic. We're talking food today.
I feel like I could do that.
Oh yeah, I feel like this one might even flow a little nicer because episode 2, a little more relaxed. We're hanging. It's gonna be a good one. So I'm gonna push it directly to you because, as we talked about in the last episode, as a flavor profilist, I feel like your point of view is gonna be really huge in this episode, especially with the ravioli theory being kind of your baby. So what do you want to talk about first? You want to dive into the ravioli theory itself, or should we talk about our own personal ways and how we craft menus in our careers?
I feel like talking about crafting menus might be a little bit exciting because not a lot of people understand the depth and scope that goes into creating a menu, and it's every chef has like their own fingerprint on how they do it. As you know from working with me in the past, I am like a psychopath and I start off by like writing thousands of ingredients that I want to use, and then I go through this whole process that I don't think any other chef that I've ever met goes through. I typically, especially like working in what we've been doing over the past couple of years, which is like seasonal restaurants. Yeah. I just start with ingredients and then kind of work. I work backwards. Like I don't think of the dish and then go, oh, I can put this ingredient into it. I think of the ingredient and then go, okay, what dish would best benefit or bring out the flavors or the texture that I'm looking for that ingredient to do. And I say it's like a Rain Man process of me just writing down every ingredient that is in that season, which is like also like fun with this because I kind of took a whole different approach where actually the dishes did come first before the ingredients. And that just goes back to like what we talked about in the first podcast, which was that approachability aspect. So what are dishes that we wanted to have on the menu? What are things that we knew we should have, we wanted to have, we had to have no matter what, and then how do we convert or change that into something that fits into the world of the ravioli theory, I guess. So
I feel like the seasonality process of it too really kind of lends itself to the ravioli theory. I mean, like your process saying you're taking the ingredients in your original process and finding what dish you want to put them in. And you think about from like an international standpoint, everything's in season or at different times around the world. So you're able to think about it from that perspective.
Which is also funny because like that was a conversation we had like in the beginning processes was what did seasonality mean for us in this concept and how are we going to approach it? Because that's something that, we both definitely take a lot of pride in our backgrounds and like what we have done, that farm to table seasonality
Yeah.
aspect. And I don't think either one of us wanted to lose that.
Well, I think
So
a big part of it, especially for me, is like the local aspect of it too, and like utilizing the local farmers and really creating a community around the restaurant. So it was like I think the conversation we had was about how we create that community and using the local process, like the local farms and the local vendors and stuff like that, while still getting that global aspect of it and not kind of pigeonholing ourselves into maybe like a New England seasonality, but also a global one.
that'd be a rough menu. If
Oh
we went
yeah,
like New England
winter.
seasonality. Winter would be strictly like German. We would just stay in Europe for the whole menu.
Yeah,
Rutabagas, beets, and potatoes.
a lot of root vegetables. We have to we have to get a root cellar somewhere to keep everything in stock.
We were expecting a very private menu, but I didn't expect everything to be beet red.
We find a way to make it interesting.
Roasties and latkes.
Everything would just be, that's where the seasoning would come in.
Pickled. We would just serve jars
Pickled
of
and
food.
preserves.
Welcome to Jar at the Ravioli Theory, where everything's served into a pickle jar.
Everything's served. Everything's fermented. Everything's preserved. And we're just you get a plate of 3 different jars. It's a chef's choice line. So you just figure out whatever you get.
But realistically, we knew that wouldn't be the right route to go with the seasonality aspect, and like you said, going with global flavors. There's things that are in season all the time, which I get really excited about, especially because like us coming from farm to table where there was times where all we had were potatoes, beets, root vegetables. Whereas like now, winter doesn't mean just root vegetables because there's other things that are in the season and warmer climates that we could bring in and, utilize and still have like we're looking at seasonality from a global standpoint. But then also how do we keep that, like you said, local aspect. And like one of the dishes that was on the menu or that we had planned on having on the menu that we actually ended up taking off. And I think it'd be a great dish to put back on, especially as we're talking about being open closer to the cooler months.
Yeah.
It's this dish from the Caribbean called tomato choka. Which is like, it's a beautiful stew dish. It's stewed tomatoes with onions, olive oil, and garlic and habanero peppers. And it's not super spicy. I know people who make it super spicy. Ours isn't super spicy, but it's just a flavorful tomato stew. But, it's one of those things where like in cooking, especially when you look at like classical French cooking, like that clean palette, like I hate actually this is the word like basic ingredients that turn into this like very bright and vibrant dish. This dish kind of like represents that, but just from a Caribbean aspect of it. Because if you look at it from a technique standpoint, they start off just like you would do, like if you were making a tomato sauce. Like you start off with a pan, olive oil, you start cooking off your aromatics with the garlic and the onion, you add your Scotch bonnet in there, and then you add in your tomatoes and you just let them cook and you just let them simmer and you bring it up to almost a boil and you drop the heat down and you just let them go until they naturally break down. And then once it's done, you take half of it, puree it, and just put it back in there. So half of it's still chunky, good, and the other half is like super saucy, and you just let it cook for a little bit longer until those flavors combine a little bit more. And it's a beautiful stewed dish, but it has like those classical French like techniques that are implemented into it, which we could talk about like how that all came down the road at some point. But talking about seasonality when we were talking about it, and I kind of used that dish as an example because I was like, well, when it's that time of the year up here, we have those 2 months of great tomatoes.
Yeah.
Then we start using these lovely heirloom tomatoes to produce that dish. Now it's like it goes from being a red dish to like an orange or a yellow dish or all these great things. So,
it takes something from, that culture and able to kind of give its twist.
Exactly. And how do we, and once again, it's an approachable dish. Like it's stewed tomatoes. Like, tomato choka sounds like, what is this? But when I was like, it's just stewed tomatoes, it just, once again, you have that approachability. And it's also like going down to, and part of what's talking about the philosophy of building a menu is like, how do we write things on the menus? That way people understand it. Because if I took half the dishes that are on the menu right now and put like their actual cultural names, we
Yeah.
would probably sell nothing.
It would be a
You
lot
would have to
very
be a
confusing
very,
at that
very
table.
adventurous person, or our servers would hate us because they would spend an hour at every table just
Just explaining
explaining
everything.
the menu. But I think that's one of the cool things that we did, and we're still working on the menu, but just where it sits right now, it's once again, it's very approachable.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I know what that is. I know. Oh, I've heard of this. We kind of name all the dishes using its generic or basic, most approachable name, and
Mhm.
then in descriptions we go into it.
Yeah.
So I think like on the menu, it's like stewed tomatoes.
Mhm.
I would never write tomato choka. And that doesn't mean like once again, it's not because we are hiding from the cultural significance of it. It's just once again, the best way that I've learned over my career is when you start introducing new things,
Mhm.
it's a lot easier to get it done if I'm like, hey, here's something
Mhm.
that you can compare it to, but oh, it's a Caribbean version of this, or it's an African, or it's a Greek version, or whatever the case may be. I can connect to it a lot faster. Versus, once again, if I come to you with some of the names, you'd be like, "Oh, here's Kalaloo." You'd be like, "What is that?" I'm gonna pass on the kala. I'm gonna
Mhm.
pass on that, and then so just having it so it's more approachable and understanding. I think we did an
Mhm.
awesome job of crafting a menu that kind of brings that a point across, and then where the cultural aspects stay on the menu is in
Mhm.
the ingredients, but also like I think we did something cool with the section titles where each section has like an area, like and we're talking about appetizers or small bites. We're using a word from another culture. We're not
Mhm.
just calling it. We're not. It's not a generic menu. It's like appetizers, salads, soups, entrees. Like we're introducing namkeen, which is Indian descent for like small bites or snacks or something like that. So you are getting some of that cultural aspect, and we're still highlighting the cultural aspect, but staying true to the ravioli, as we said before, being that approachable symbol.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like going back to just like the name and the titles and even just the sections of the menu. One thing I really like that we've hit on, like you said, is having those approachable names. And though we're not hiding from the diversity in our cultures in the within the menu, we're kind of making them more approachable. And then, ideally, especially when it comes to the experience of being at the ravioli theory, our servers, our bartenders will have that knowledge, be like, that's great. This is a play on this and have the background for it. So I think part of what we're looking for is to create, information and knowledge while dining. So it creates a lot of, opportunities to teach and to just kind of disperse information that we have about this while also making it still so approachable, like you said. And I can't tell you how many times I've been at a restaurant like, I don't know how to say that, so I'm just going to point to it and hope that my server is close enough. This one right here, the one that starts with this H that I'm not going to try. So having that, I think, makes it just even more approachable for a lot of people to come and not feel awkward ordering, because I definitely know
It's
enough
also
of my
funny
friends
is like
that don't know how to
if
do
you
that.
go to like authentic like Chinese restaurants
Yeah.
or like Thai restaurants, and they think of it because they
Mhm.
rate everything in their language,
Yeah.
and then they'll like translate it and like into English, but
Mhm.
it still is like, what is that?
Mhm.
And like the dish I always think about and I always like joke about the most, it's like every Chinese restaurant has this dish on the menu and it's called the Happy Family. And
Mhm.
you're like, what is that? Like, and like it's so like they understand like people can't really like understand certain things and they try to do their best. But I always find it funny when you go into like an authentic Asian restaurant and they're like, what are you gonna get? And then like you get the pointer who's like,
Mhm.
I'm gonna do this. And then they're like, oh, H23. And you're like, because they have like a whole
Mhm. Call
lettering system
numbers.
and like number system. And it's like you clearly understand like this is
Yep.
not something that's unique to us. It's
Yeah.
definitely something. Same thing, like we go to this Greek restaurant,
Yep.
and it's the same. Like we look at the menu, and like I like to think I have a very diverse background on food sometimes, but there are moments where like I even get stumped, and
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
like, I have no clue how to say that word. And then it's like if I'm with friends or like if I'm with my family, or if we're with not friends, but like if it's like someone in her family, like
Mhm.
my girl's family, they all look at me and I'm supposed to know everything.
Mm.
And I'm just like,
It's station, you're the
I
flavor
don't
officer,
have a clue how to pronounce this. I'm not going to try, but I'll always ask too. I'm
Mhm.
like, how do you say this? And then I'll try like to get it
Mhm.
that way. I don't just want to be like, oh, can I get this? But it's an opportunity for me to learn for
Oh,
sure.
for sure.
So yeah, but I think a lot of what we do, and it's not just as chefs, as any professional will tell you, you kind of fall back on your past experiences, you know?
Oh,
And I'm not going to sit here and be like, I was the brainchild and the genius behind putting these names on the menu. You honestly want to know where this idea came from? And it's going to be funny because we made jokes about that last episode. This is 100% a Walt Disney thing.
oh, the only place you've ever worked.
This is 100% a Walt Disney. If you go to, there's two places that I will always use as examples for cultural significance. It is Animal Kingdom
Mm.
and Epcot. And like there is a lot more in depth than a lot of people think. Like
Mhm.
at Epcot, all the culture, like all the countries that are in the World Showcase, you have to be either one of two things. You either have to be from that country to work there,
Mhm.
or you have to take a test, almost like a citizenship test, to show that you have enough knowledge to
Wow.
work in those countries. So, like, I got an opportunity to work from people like from around the world, but
Mhm.
the reasoning behind that is so therefore they're not mocking the
Yeah.
culture. Like, if I'm going to Germany and you got to explain this, like, I want someone who's really going to have a love and enjoy of it. And you
Yeah.
go into those like, if you go into any of the like pavilions as they're called, but any of those countries, you get a sense of this is their home.
Yeah.
They are proud of it. They're going to make sure you understand it, and it's done in such a tasteful way where it's like because it's their culture, it's not that like so welcome to Germany.
Mhm.
These are like it's actually someone who understand who grew up eating these items or
Mhm.
working in these areas or dressing a certain way
Yep.
who's actually explaining the cultural significance of it. And the other place is Animal Kingdom. Like if you go on to the safari that's there, right above the seats, they actually have pictures of all the animals. And it is every animal, they write it in Swahili. So
Mhm.
as you're driving around, you'll hear the Swahili word for the
Mhm.
animal too. And it's a low key way of we're giving you knowledge, but we're not shoving it in your face where
Yeah.
it's like, I'm learning today. It's more like, oh, I walked away and I learned that this means this,
Yeah.
you know, Simba means lion, and like you start to connect the dots where like now you feel like you learned something, but it's not in the like I had to go to school kind of way. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, I actually learned this word means this. That's cool.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like where this came into play. I guess it's such a Disney way of doing
Mhm.
something where I'm going to add this little tidbit of learning that you wouldn't expect that now you're like, oh, I kind of walked away from it. Because, a part of eating, we look at it sometimes as we use all our senses. Yes, it's visual,
Mhm.
there's smell, there's sound, there's all these things. But now in today's world, part of that experience is learning.
Yeah.
You're going out to find out something new. And sometimes the things that stick with you are the things you learn by accident. Like
Mhm.
someone didn't come over and have to read you the menu because it's
Yeah.
all in French or all in Greek, but you were just skimming through it and it was like, oh, I never knew that. Or what's this writing here? Like we have the Greek word for sandwiches on there and it is using the Greek alphabet. So it's like, it's an eye catcher. You're like,
Yeah.
what is that word? So it's just so much little tidbits of like education on the menu.
Yeah. Trying to like disperse knowledge through the experience without shoving it in your face.
I guess some credit to my old boss, the mouse, because he definitely learned that and took that from him. But it's part of building an experience,
Mhm.
and I will say I have all the places I work, Disney is the king of
The
you know
experience.
the experience, but also like the littlest details.
Yeah.
They make you understand how important the littlest details are,
Mhm.
and that was I would say one of the biggest things I took from that company.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great things. There's a lot of not so great things that you hear in the media and all that. But I will say, when it comes to the littlest detail, the littlest, like there's stuff that that was not like, did we really have to do that?
That
Like,
was not necessary. No one
where
was
is it?
paying
And
for it.
Magic Kingdom and Liberty Square.
Mhm.
If you ever walk, like the the road it's red, has this brownish, dooky colored like trail, and it's actually because during that period that Liberty Square is in, they
Mhm.
had no indoor plumbing.
Oh,
So
really?
in those days, you used to just throw
Oh.
your poop
They're just
out the window,
paying
and
homage to that?
it would just
Or
run. So it's paying attention to those details where you're like, I would never be like, hey, let's put a poop stain like
Yeah,
the
just like
line.
the symbolism when we used to throw poop in the streets.
But
That's so interesting.
it's paying attention to those details. I
Yeah.
think that was a big thing I gathered from there. Like everything they did there served a purpose.
Yeah.
And that's how I kind of look at food. Like we talk about garnishing, and you never want to garnish with something inedible or doesn't
Yeah.
make sense. It's the same thing. And they look at it from every like
Mhm.
aspect. They had Kodak make a special color green so that pictures pop when you take photos there.
Oh, really?
Like who thinks of that kind of
Yeah.
stuff? But it kind of when you work there, you're starting to learn all that stuff. Like it
Mhm.
makes you think. So now where we're at a point we're owning our own. I'm sitting here trying to make sure like, are we hitting every detail? Does
Yeah.
this make sense? How can we do this and how can we do that? So, that's a little nod to the mouse. I'm gonna stop talking about it now because that's not the only place I work.
This is
But
now the Walt Disney podcast.
don't say that. I don't want to get sued. They're also the kings of suing people. So let's
True.
not do that.
I take it back. Or Disney sponsor us. Give us free stuff. No.
But going back to the menu, we have a menu kind of semi done.
Yep.
There's a lot of work that still needs done. It's very far and in between. But going back to what we originally talked about was like, how are we going to start this process of writing this menu?
Yep.
And I would say, once again, it started with dishes and then adding ingredients. But I think that also comes from going back to the ravioli theory and what we talked about in episode 1, whereas, there's certain rules that outlines, how do we do things? Because once again, we don't want to be mocking or making it our own in the sense that like we're not appreciative of the cultural background or history it comes from. So, the first rule to the ravioli theory is that you have to stay true to one of two things. We're either going to stay true to the dish itself in the sense that if we're making what let's see what we got on the menu that I can talk about. So let's just for example, like we're gonna make harissa. Now there's a process to it and there are ingredients to it. We need to stay true to one of them. So if I am changing an ingredient that's not traditionally in harissa, then the process of making the harissa has to be identical to the culture. If I am changing the process, so I think a great example is something from my past. I did a beef brajol dish. Brajol is it's like a rustic Italian dish. They use like fling steak or like some kind of like very untender cut of beef.
Yeah.
It's normally like stuffed with like breadcrumbs, cheese, some kind of meat like pepperoni or salami or something. They're then trussed or rolled and tied with butcher twine and then braised in tomato sauce. I worked at an Italian restaurant. It's the only Italian restaurant I've ever worked at in my career. It'll probably be the only Italian restaurant I will ever work in my career. And that's just because I feel like Northern Italian food is so overdone, especially where we live because we're in New England. You can like throw a rock and find one. It's not very hard to find an Italian place. I will say it's very hard to find a great Italian place, but Italian as a general, they're just everywhere. But in that restaurant, I wanted to do something different. Once again, living in my world of ravioli theory, I was like, all right, I got to stay true to the dish in one of two ways. Either we're going to change the ingredients or we're going to change the technique. So, and by change the ingredients, I don't mean like if it's beef, we now use chicken. Like I still stay very close to home. So like the example of this would be, if I am using beef for beef, I'm not changing the ingredient. I'm just changing the cut of beef. There's nothing wrong with that. So what we did was instead of using flink, we actually used beef tenderloin.
Yeah.
And then we butterflied it, and then we would pound it out until it was like thin, and then stuffed it. It was like spinach, pepperoni, salami, pecorino, mozzarella. There's so much breadcrumbs, and then we rolled them up into pinwheels, trussed them, which means we tied with butcher's twine, and then cut them into like fillet style slices, and then we would grill them, and then we would slice it on a bias, and then it would get a tomato gas streak. So like all the basis of the ingredients were there. We still had the tomato, we still had the beef, we still had the cheeses and the meats and everything. But what we changed was the cooking technique of it.
Yes.
So staying true to the ingredients, we changed the technique. If it was the other way around, or I could have did it the whole way, but who's gonna ruin a fillet by braising it in tomato sauce? But, it's just always you gotta stay true to one of those because once again, we're trying to show respect to
Yep.
a culture. We don't wanna, for all lack of the word, but bastardize a cultural dish. I have a lot of friends from different cultures and, like, I have a lot of people that I've talked to, and even me, like, culturally, I get upset. I have group of friends from college who are all I call them my sisters, but we're all from some kind of Caribbean background and descent. Like, my mom's family is from St. Thomas. My friend Nat, she's first generation American because her family's from Jamaica. We have Dom, who's from Barbados. Like, she was born there and moved here. So, like, we talk a lot when it comes to, like, the Caribbean stuff
Mhm.
sometimes. Because right now we are in the oxtail phase of the world where everything is oxtail something.
Mhm.
It's oxtail pizza, oxtail grilled cheese, quesadillas, and it's just like, why are you doing it's not that I have, like, against anyone using it, but,
Mhm.
like, there's no like, it's getting to the point where, like, people think oxtails are not good because 'cause they're not done correctly,
Yeah,
and
they're
it's
not
like
taking care of
understanding, like, there's a
yeah.
cultural significance of why it's cooked the way it is, and,
Mhm.
like, there's also the techniques don't just go like, there's a reason why we chose to braise oxtails
Yeah.
because grilling them would not be the smart way to go
Nope.
because, and it's just like, yes, it's a beautiful flavor and it's a very great meat, and the price of oxtails right now are astronomical because
Mhm.
everybody and their mom is cooking them right now, but you gotta understand the ingredient and understand the cultural background behind
Mhm.
the ingredient. Because then when you understand those things, you start to understand the dish and why it's the way
Yeah.
you love to eat it, you know?
Why do you think oxtail's gotten so big recently?
Us, because it's everywhere on TikTok. Like,
Oh, really?
every single person has some kinda dish, and it became like the get rich quick scheme of the
Mm.
food world. It was like, "I'm gonna sell plates with oxtails, and then I'm gonna
Mhm.
make it cool." And then it was like, birria took off, and it was like, "Now I wanna do oxtail birria," and it's like,
Mhm.
you don't even need to change it. They're both stewed meats. Like, you don't need to make one or the other. And
Yeah.
it's just like, and it's also like no, it's becoming like a thing where oxtails were something that was found in the Caribbean and Africa. They were actual like ox old cows.
Mhm.
That's why they got the name because in other cultures, like I use the example of my mom again, where I grew up eating lamb and hating lamb
Mhm.
because to me, I thought lamb tastes like lemon juice. And that was because like my mom grew up cooking it the way my grandfather did, who lived on an island where you didn't just kill sheep. Like
Mhm.
you didn't kill like lamb. You killed like the old animal in the back
Mhm.
that's been around for a while. Was the mutton,
Mhm.
that has lived way past its prime. And you're like, let's put out the misery, but we're not just gonna waste this meat. Let's eat. So you would marinate it in like highly acidic foods, citrus,
Mhm.
vinegar, stuff like that, to get that gamey flavor out of it.
Mhm.
And then you would cook it.
Mhm.
So then at the point it just tastes like meat.
Yeah.
Whereas when they came to America, like they're from St. Thomas, which is part of America, but like
Yeah.
let's be honest, when they came to the States,
Mhm.
they took those same practices, not understanding that the meat's a lot younger and
Mhm.
cleaner, and you can't marinate American or New Zealand lamb for 24 hours of lemon juice, or it's gonna taste
It's
like
like
lemon
lemon juice.
juice. So, I was that kid that when we got to culinary school, everyone would just stare at us and be like, and I'd be like, I'm not eating lamb. And they're
Mhm.
like, why not? And I was like, I don't like it.
Mhm.
Why not? It just tastes like I bit into a lemon. And then everyone would stare at me like, what are you talking about? And, like, that's when I kinda, like, learned things. I was like, "Oh my god, this actually doesn't have to taste like lemon." So, a big part of this is understanding cultural
Yeah.
significance, understanding cultural backgrounds, and then once you understand the techniques that go along with it,
Mhm.
and that helps you manipulate it. Because now if I understand why you marinated it in lemon juice, now I can take that and look at it from the standpoint of where I am today to go, "Okay, this step makes sense for the dish.
Mhm.
Clearly, we need to add some form of citrus or
Mhm.
some form of acid to it, but do I really need to marinate this for 24 hours, or is there a way I can get around it but still getting close to those flavors that are significant to the way my mom grew up eating lamb?"
Yeah, just understanding the process that they were going through for specific reasons and why we can adjust them now based off of the product that we're using, where we're getting it from.
The other aspect is once you understand the ingredient, like the technique, I mean,
Mhm.
Then you start looking at ingredients, and then you start looking at how do these flavors mesh well together.
Yeah.
You know, for anyone out there who wants to be a flavor profilist like I used to be, I will always recommend two great books. One is called The Flavor Bible.
Mhm.
I think I've showed you that book.
Yeah, I
Did I
have that
give you
one.
one?
Yeah. I don't know
Yeah.
if you gave me I definitely have one.
So that is like my book that I buy most people. So it's a great tool for anyone who's starting off, even if you don't like, you're not doing it from an international standpoint. But it is a great book to help you understand flavors because
Yeah.
it's a dictionary of flavors. Like you will look in the book, you can look up an ingredient, and they will give you a list of every ingredient that truly goes well with that
Yeah.
like dish. Another great book is The Flavor Matrix. That is
Just gonna bring that
almost
one up.
the same kind of concept. It's just more visually aesthetic,
Yeah.
and it hits notes and stuff that you don't traditionally see in a flavor book Bible. So those are two great books that are very close but very
Especially
different
the
at the
flavor
same.
matrix I use a lot to go for like unlikely pairings.
Yeah,
Because that's a big part of what they do in that book is just to have a whole list of, maybe you look up chocolate and it gives you a whole list of things you wouldn't think to necessarily use chocolate with.
yeah, and then it also has like that great spice section in it
Yeah,
too, which is
especially
very very useful.
yeah.
So something like that becomes beneficial of understanding how flavors work well
Yeah.
together. What two things, and one of the things that we always say is thinking beyond the pasta.
Mhm.
It's the same thing. It's getting your brain to think outside of its normal realm of like 1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah.
Sometimes 1 and 3 can get you there too. But it's just, really sitting down and understanding and how do those flavors work. So I think one of the things, that we did really good was once again connecting flavors and cultures that one might not take to
Mhm.
go with one another, but connecting it in a way that it does. So, you know, looking at the menu, for example, one of the dishes that we had at event, the
Mhm.
lamb meatballs,
Yeah.
like we took two European cultures, but combined them who are typically completely different. We
Yeah.
took a northern Italian dish and then married it with a Greek dish.
Yeah.
And like it shouldn't work when you like first think about
No,
it.
on paper, it doesn't make any
It's
sense at
like,
all.
we have okay, you can make a meatball out of whatever. You want to use lamb, congratulations, you
Mhm.
use lamb. But then I think the part that really threw everyone off was like we had warm tomato tzatziki.
Yeah, honestly, when we made that, when I took that first just taste of it, the amount of cucumber that was coming through on a tomato sauce and a warm tomato sauce, considering, you think about cucumbers, you're like, "I never want that to be warm
Yeah, it
again.
has to be cold. It's a
It
cucumber.
has to be
It's
cold."
a salad topping.
Yeah, you do not want warm but there was something about it, just the way that, blending with the mint and everything, it just came together so perfectly.
It had
And it
like all the notes, like the
yeah, it
acidity,
balanced so well.
the lightness of it. Like it wasn't heavy.
Yeah.
Like it was super light. You got the acidity from the lemon in it, but
Mhm.
you also got it from the tomato.
Yeah.
Like it worked well. And then there was also like we finished it with Greek yogurt
Mhm.
versus like using cream. So
Yeah.
we almost made like almost like a pink sauce, but it was using all of the notes and the ingredients of
Mhm.
tzatziki. So when you tried it, like you heard it and you read it and you're like, red tzatziki. And then
Yeah.
you try it, was like, okay, that makes no sense, but my mouth enjoys it. But like that's really how like the whole menu is like it's thought about. It's just, currently, like I said, we're gonna be changing the menu, but looking at it right now, there's over 20 countries on
Yeah.
our menu. And that's not even a lot of dishes. It's a relatively small menu. It touches a lot of different points and areas, and I think it's a very well-rounded menu. But just in the amount of items on here, like,
What we have 19 items
yeah, you're
technically.
talking 20
Mm,
culture, like
20 different cultural influences
and it's
across those
not like
19 items.
one dish where it's just like, oh, it's this one is this culture, and this one,
Yeah.
like, it's all like the first thing on here. We have like the fingerling papas bravas, which is papa bravas is a potato dish from Spain. We have harissa ketchup going on it
Mhm.
that brings in, parts of India and the Middle East, and then you have the chimichurri from Argentina. So
Mhm.
like you're hitting so many different cultures in one particular dish, but when you try those flavors, it just
Mhm.
works together.
Yeah, and it's, I think using, things from different cultures, different countries that are also just approachable enough,
Yep.
by blending the flavors, you kind of just show like a new light or a new perspective on how they can be put together.
And I think that's like the cool thing once again, that approachability is like every single dish on the menu is like it starts with home. Like,
Yeah.
as an American, you understand, like,
Yeah.
so, like, potatoes, I got you, or
Yeah.
it's like chicken wings or, meatballs, like, I understand where this is starting.
Yeah.
Now let me read the description and understand if I know where it's going,
Yeah.
but even still, like, the descriptions aren't, like, written in a way where it's confusing, you know what I mean? There are opportunities where our servers will be trained to answer, like, questions,
Oh, for sure.
but it's not a menu where you would feel discouraged or like, should I ask or do I just take the chance? Because
Exactly, right.
who wants to be like I'm that person that if I hate asking questions.
Mhm.
I don't know if it's because I work in the restaurant
Yeah.
industry, but I'm the guy that won't pull over for directions.
Mm.
I will just try to figure it out myself. But it's a comfortability. Like,
Yeah.
you don't wanna come off as, like, someone who doesn't know something, and
Yeah.
there's few people who are comfortable being that person, but
Mhm.
9 times out of 10, you get people who don't understand or don't, and you've seen it
Yeah.
because those are where you get the reviews of, "I ordered this, and it came with this," and it was like, "Well, that's the same thing," like,
That's how it was supposed to go.
Gruyere is a cheese, like, I don't I don't know what you want me to tell you.
Yeah.
So it's, making it so that people who come into our restaurant and our establishment actually feel comfortable.
Yeah, yeah, it's a big part of creating the experience where you're comfortable to ask the questions and to learn and, maybe coming off or trying to come off in a way that isn't, maybe pretentious from our side
Yeah.
because that's not what we're going for. Even though we are doing maybe some newer things that, the key demographic that we'll be serving maybe hasn't seen. That doesn't mean we want to, push people away from trying our restaurant. That's not the goal is has always been to create a learning experience in a place that can disperse the knowledge without pushing people away by being too out there.
Yeah,
And I think we've hit a pretty great balance, at least with this first draft of the menu. And as we continue on developing it, I think we'll get even better. And I'm just excited for people to try what we have.
yeah, and it goes back to, like, the staff training and
Exactly. That's a big.
understanding. But, like, the funny thing is where if you go to, like, any of these super big stuffy restaurants where
Mhm,
you go to, like, a classically French restaurant, it's,
mhm.
like, fine dining and, you sit down and you got 3 forks and, and it's proper etiquette, white glove dining, but
Mhm,
it's also, it's like, shame on you for not knowing
mhm.
kinda restaurants,
Yeah.
and it's like, as much as I love this industry and I love food, I am not the person that typically goes to those kind of
Oh,
restaurants.
never.
And it's
Yeah.
not because I don't find, like, the food or an environment,
Oh,
like,
no, I'm
I've
sure
gone to
that
those restaurants and, like, I've had great experiences,
for sure.
but as a person who enjoys, like, the knowledge of food,
Mm.
I will pick a hole in the wall restaurant
Every time.
over any of those restaurants, like a Michelin star restaurant or something, for
Mm,
example. I would take a hole in the wall, and the reason why is we talk about approachability. I
mm,
can go into this hole in the wall Greek place or
mm,
this hole in the wall Caribbean place or, you know, Thai place or whatever.
mm.
And 9 times out of 10, the people who work there, they're all related or
Yeah.
there's some form of family. And they're just everyday people who's
Mm.
just enjoys their food and wants to share it. So part of that is like they welcome those questions. We were like,
Yeah.
oh, well, what is this? And I'm like, they will have those conversations. And
Yeah.
as a chef, those conversations are, like, priceless to me because then I'm
Yeah.
learning from like, the amount of times I've talked to people in restaurants and gotten more knowledge than just, like, reading a book about it because, like, think about it, like, most of the times those books are designed to be consumer friendly,
Yeah.
no matter what the cookbook is. Even cookbooks that are designed for chefs,
Yeah.
supposedly, are still designed to be consumer friendly. So when you talk to someone from one of these cultures, for years, I have been trying to figure out why can't I make chicken and broccoli at home the
Mm.
way I order it and get it from like a restaurant. And like, there's a whole process that no recipe book will ever talk to you about
Mm.
how they marinate their meat, and it changes the whole texture. Because I usually be like, all right, I got it. It's oyster sauce, it's soy sauce,
Yeah.
it's this, is that. Like the sauce is fine. Why is my chicken
Texture.
seem dry and tough and hard, or my beef or whatever it
Yeah.
is? And it's this whole process that they do. It's called velveting,
Mm.
but like it's a way that they marinate their meat that tenderizes it
Yeah.
naturally. And they use like it's not like they're adding anything special to
Mm.
it, but a lot of understanding comes from those conversations that
Yeah.
I just have in like restaurants. Because I'll go and I'll be like, all right, listen, like I try to make X, Y, and Z, and it's not like the word today, it's not like they're gatekeeping the
Yeah.
recipe. It's just like no one ever acts like this
Yeah.
is how we do it. And then you get like people who be like, oh, they're not using real chicken. It's no, they are. They just have a technique that no one understands because no one talked to them about it. And a lot of these times when I go to like hole in the wall restaurants, I get so much knowledge.
Oh, for sure.
Like
I feel
Indian
like
restaurants, I've learned so much just by waiting for my food because
mhm,
I'm just talking to people. And like they understand it's like a place of respect. So
mhm.
then they're all like, oh, well, here's all the information you
Yeah.
want. And it's the coolest thing.
Yeah, and I feel like also with those hole in the wall places too, a lot of times you can get either the chef or the owner themselves
Yep.
who are really putting all the time and effort in to create their restaurant. So
Oh, 100%.
and you get all of their experience and their heritage and just, especially in just the smaller, more like culturally refined restaurants that like, hone in on one. That's yeah, it's very cool.
Well,
It's always a good conversation, which is fun.
it's also like Marco Pierre White talks about like the
Mhm.
Michelin star.
Yeah.
And like if you don't know who Marco Pierre White is, he is highly regarded in the industry. He's the chef that trained Gordon
Mhm.
Ramsay. He was also one of the chefs to receive a Michelin star at the youngest ages. And
Mhm.
then he's also the chef that denied the Michelin star. It was like, I don't want it.
Yeah.
But his whole like reasoning behind not wanting it is because if you looked at the Michelin star today versus where it was when it first started, like
Mhm.
the process has changed so much
Yeah.
where it's become about the star. Where
Yeah.
years ago, like it had to be about consistency.
Mhm.
So I didn't just come and eat in your restaurant once and be like, oh, this is a 2-star restaurant. Like
Mhm.
there was years
Yeah, they come
of me
multiple
coming
times and
back
you
to
gotta
make
do
sure that you were consistent every single time someone walked in. Um, the chef had to work in the restaurant.
mhm.
Like you had to be like Marco Pierre says all the time, like to be a true chef, you have to be behind the stove. But like it's true, like to get a Michelin star, like the chef had to, if it was his restaurant, he
Mhm.
had to be behind the stove in the line, on the burger, actually cooking. Where
Mhm.
nowadays, there's chefs with Michelin stars who've never gone in their restaurant and
Yeah.
like, oh, like their names on it and they know someone who works with them as a partner who built the restaurant. Because
Mhm.
let's be honest, as chefs, we don't have money. um, but
For sure.
it just like it's that same thing aspect of like understanding and being the person that's actually back there doing it, which is like that's one of my biggest fears is getting so far away from it that like we don't understand what
Yeah.
we're doing anymore. Like
Yeah, that's one of the first things that you and I talked about is that when you're creating or you're designing things for your restaurant or for the line or doing specific things for specific dishes on specific stations, it's like never forget what it was like to be a line cook.
yep,
Because the second you forget that, you just kind of lost one all credibility with your team because now you're expecting them to create something or produce something that a isn't really feasible or maybe it's just the technique is too difficult in the moment. And it's like if you're kind of you're expecting a certain amount of time to get that dish out, and then you're creating the hardest possible path to get it there. So
er,
in all aspects, just remember what it was like to be the black cook, remember what it was like to be the sous chef, remembering
mhm.
what it was like to be the CDC as you continue on your progression in your career. And I feel like as owners now that we're stepping into those roles, and while we still have an extremely active role, probably just the two of us in the kitchen, maybe to start, but as we kind of grow out of that and continue to add, talented young line cooks and chefs, that's something that's always resonated with me is just to remember what it was like to be on that line and to be on garde manger or to be on the smallest, maybe in some eyes, the least important stations. To
But
always remember.
that's also like a big part of like the menu writing,
Yeah.
what I mean? Whereas as I can sit here and write a dish with 50 ingredients in it and 2 sauces and gets plated to the sky and has height, everything's about height.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Gonna
but, understanding and remember where you come from, it's like having that mind stuff to be respectful to your staff,
yeah.
Did I wanna be the line cook that cooked the dish with 50 fucking components in it? Absolutely not.
Never.
You know what I mean? So why would I do that and then be the guy on the other side who's gonna be bitching and moaning about why is this dish not out the kitchen in
Oh,
15
for
minutes?
sure.
You know what I mean?
I mean, even
You
now, like I put, I have a couple items I put on, the last restaurant I worked at, and at some point, like 2 weeks in, I'm like, I am tired of making this fucking dish, and I'm the one that wrote it.
Hey, it's
And
just
I get slid onto the station, whether it's to cover or get some people some time off for vacation, and I'm making it, and I'm like, why on earth did I put this fucking difficult ass dish on on a station that's trying to get stuff out in under 10 minutes?
and I always tell people too is like, I'm the king of like trying stuff as specials. And that does not mean like don't try it on a Tuesday night.
No.
Like try it on a Friday and Saturday when you
See
know
how you
you're gonna
feel.
get smacked in the face and see how it like whirls. And like most of the time, like I'll also like if it's one of those things, I work on it myself a lot of times
Yeah.
because I'll go behind a line. All right, let me do the first couple.
Yeah.
This was a mistake.
We can't do it.
86 the special for tonight makes no sense. We'll do something else with this product.
Yeah.
But it's like, once again, understanding what it's like to be that line cook
Yeah.
that, you know, a lot of people who don't work in the industry don't understand. Because I remember like my mom first walking into a commercial kitchen that I was a chef at, and she was like, what is happening? Like, oh, we just flat set. Like, we're cooking every single table right now. And like, she couldn't fathom because in her head, I ordered the food and now you work on my food and then the food comes to the table. And no,
Everything's
like
the same.
everybody who ordered, their food's coming in at the same time.
Yeah.
So this guy on saute right now is ripping out 40 dishes in a like 20-minute period.
Yeah.
And like a lot of like being able to make that happen is the way the menu's like constructed and understanding how dishes are built. And, you know, if I want to make sure dishes go out at a certain time, I got to make sure that the components make sense. And like I've worked in restaurants where it was like these very pretentious style of cooking and like we're making this dish and it has 20 ingredients in it. And that's now going to slow me down for the rest because I can't focus on anything else but this one dish because if it overcooks or is undercooked or this is not right. And like, yes, it's great to serve that, but like it's different when you're taking those dishes and you're doing it in a tasting menu setting where everyone's getting the same plate. So I have time to dedicate to that versus like an a la carte setting where I'm cooking everybody's food at the same time. And it's like, okay, this idea seems really cool. I want to do it because it seems really cool and it doesn't make sense in real world application. You know? We were catering, 100% we can do it. If we were doing a tasting menu, 100% we can do it. But like when you're sitting there and you're creating menus, it's like, you know, like I always try to make sure everyone has like some kind of input when we do a menu. It's like, okay, how did it go today? What were your pain points?
Yeah.
What did you like? What didn't you like?
Feedback is
and like sometimes I would say 9 times out of 10, I'm like, okay, let's see if we can change it. Sometimes it's that one time where it's like, okay, that can't change. Like, this is a moment
There's certain things where you
we have to
just
suck it up.
you gotta push through on that one to be able to get the plate that we want out.
Yeah, but like most of the time, it's like, okay, how can we reconstruct this to make it make more sense behind the line?
Yeah.
And it doesn't impact the guest. That's the
Yeah.
number one thing. It can't impact the guest. Like you're not making things easier, so it's like easier on you, and the guest hates it.
Yeah, we don't want to lessen the experience to lessen the load on our team.
Yeah.
You know, we got to find a healthy balance.
Yeah.
And I should note that we've been saying, you know, for people that don't work, or a lot of people don't know that haven't worked in the industry. Not that we're trying to say that there's like a whole behind the curtain thing that's going on, but there is an aspect of you know, there's a level of ease that people perceive when it comes to restaurants.
Yeah.
I think what we're trying to do here as well is not only show, you know, what it's like to start the process of opening a restaurant, but also to kind of give you a behind the scenes curtain of the amount of work and effort and planning and structure and, you know, adjustments that need to go into creating a restaurant and then honing in the experience and getting the team and the systems down to a point where everything makes sense, right? The restaurants are massive moving machines, you know. There's so many moving parts, and you know, as little things go wrong, it's definitely a domino effect. And you can see that in certain restaurants that get disjointed, right? So one of the things that we're trying to do here is get all those systems in place before we open. And that's why we wanted to do the podcast, to kind of show people how we build everything slowly from the ground down.
How our crazy minds work.
Yeah, exactly. It does take a certain type of person to work in the industry. And we say the industry a lot, maybe in a slightly pretentious way, even though it's not a very glamorous industry. It's not nearly as glamorous as it is portrayed on TV. And
I don't know, but I feel like as a chef, or you know, I know servers and bartenders who are the same way.
Yeah.
So anyone who works in the industry, we thrive in chaos.
Completely.
Like, if it was
It's
the glamorous world of what like TV was, I feel like none of us would be successful because we'd be like, what is this?
Yeah.
Whereas like the chaos is like, if I am on a line, you know, every chef has the station they love to work. For me, it's always been saute.
Yeah.
You put me on a saute on a Tuesday night and I have not worked the station in forever. It would be the worst service of my life because 9 times out of 10, it's slow. It's not busy. You put me on a Saturday, even if I haven't worked a line in forever, first half an hour is going
It's
to
gonna
be
be a
an
little rough.
adjustment and it's going to be a rough. And I'm like, why the hell am I on the station?
Yeah.
But then, the old mechanisms kick in and you just kind of like your mind takes over it.
Yeah.
And, I never forget, I worked at Water Place Restaurant in
Mhm.
Providence. And when I left there to go to Disney. And then when I left Disney, I came back up here for a little bit.
Mhm.
And I was in between like looking for a job or whatever. And the chef was like, "Hey, are you available?" And I was like, "Yeah, what's up?" And she was like, "We have a water fire, and that restaurant is right on the basin."
Mhm.
So like they would book water fires like a year in advance.
So what is a water fire?
For everyone who's not in Rhode Island, water fire is this unique event. I feel like I'm not the greatest person to explain it because as a person who worked them and lived around them, I still don't understand the point of them. I think it has something to do with art, like, but pretty much they
Well,
have
from
this
your
river
perspective, from the
that
restaurant side of water fire.
they light water on fire and people think it's cool. Um, so this is what I want you to
People
do.
should do their own
Go
research on this.
to like Hobby Lobby and buy some floating candles and then fill your sink up or your bathtub and light the candles and then turn off all your lights and play really weird awkward music like opera music.
I feel like you're not explaining this well.
That's why I said I don't understand it, but realistically I know it's like it's something kind of art thing.
But it's a very large.
It's huge. People in Providence love it. I am not from New England, so I am not one of those people. I worked them, so I therefore didn't like them.
That's
And even
fair.
though I don't work them now, I don't get them.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there just like, why is this? Why were we busy to see this kind of thing? But pretty much like all I know, it's some kind of art installation
Right.
where they put these basins in the water that rose through downtown Providence. Every restaurant who is like on the water gets filled because people love to like see it and they like
Mhm.
these basins on fire. There's like gondola rides. It's like some connection with like Italy or France or something. They play like opera from that music, like from that country
Mhm.
over like loudspeakers. It's a huge fundraising event.
That's fantastic.
They also have like great street vendors. Like from a foodie standpoint, I enjoy it.
Yeah.
I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like a person who like absolutely loves food, I'm like, oh, I can go get like food from random places that I don't know where they are
That's
and I
awesome.
can just eat. I don't know why they're playing this music in the background. That is like how I like look at it. But anyway, going
Okay, so
back
coming
to
back. You're at
so
Water Place
they
during the
call me
water
back to work a
fire.
water fire, which is like a nightmare and a half. Ticket
I
times were never what they were supposed to be. Ticket times were supposed to be like 15, 20 minutes. We would be lucky if they were like a half an hour. It is like if you watch The Bear,
Mhm.
remember episode the season one when they turned on the takeout
Oh,
and the
just keep
printer
going.
never stopped?
It was like that.
That is water fire. But it was like on purpose.
Yeah.
It wasn't like someone messed up. This is just
it
what
was just
we
the
did.
reality of the situation.
They called and asked me if I could work it, and like I'm like I haven't worked on that line in like over 2 years, and I'm
Yeah.
like do it. I will tell you, I was hurting the next day,
Oh, I'm
but
sure.
they connected me with. We had another chef in the company who's like she knows she's like the culinary love of my life. My girlfriend understands that she has to share me. It's not just you, but
I can share.
Leah was a chef at the company, and we would work together,
Mm.
like on saute. Saute was the biggest station in that kitchen.
Yep.
She would do,
How
I
many
would
burners?
pick up and she would drop, meaning that I would start all the dishes and
Mm.
then she would plate all the dishes.
Yeah.
And how many burners?
Yeah, how many burners?
It was 3 8-burner stoves.
Okay.
So huge.
24 burners. Yeah.
And she would like, we never had to talk, but when
Mhm.
I tell you it was like harmony,
Yeah.
like we just knew
Good
where the
dance.
other one would be or whatever. Like if I was missing something, she would be like, "Oh, that's about to burn," and catch it for me. And like it was funny because like everyone else would look at us like, "How the hell are they doing this?"
Oh,
And they're
man.
not even. And I remember it was at one point. So I started working there just to help on water fires.
Yeah.
And it was at one point like me and her were actually hitting our like ticket times, and no one else was. So they were like, "You got to stop cooking." So we like left. It was actually the first time I seen a water fire. We left the kitchen so everyone else could catch up. And I'm sitting outside like, why are we busy? Because this is what they're coming for. But like, it's a huge event. Everyone does it. But like, it was just like, once again, you just have that knowledge of understanding. Like, you have to have the right menu for that.
Mhm.
If your menu doesn't make sense, like that ship's going down a lot harder than it
Yeah.
already is. And I remember when I first started in that place, like I was working water fires, and I was just like, what the hell? Because I started like on a Wednesday.
Mhm.
No one told me what was going to happen on the weekend. And I got to the weekend and I was like, I don't think I, and that was like my first real kitchen job was at
Yeah.
that restaurant, which I give,
That was during Johnson Wales.
huh?
That was during Johnson Wales.
Yeah, I was
100%.
still
Yeah,
at
they were
Johnson
sitting
Wells
there.
when I started working there. So I got that job my sophomore year.
Yeah.
I started there as a prep cook, then worked my way to garde manger. In a
Mhm.
few like weeks,
Mhm.
someone like left and they had to fill a hole. And then from garde manger, I went to apps, and then I like was like apps was like in this tiny quarter,
Mm.
like corner of the kitchen. And you, as you can see, I'm not a small person. So I was like, I have to get off the station. And then I ended up on saute, and I was like, I'm good. This is where I'll live for now on. But yeah, like in the time when I started, Angie, who is a chef that I give a lot of praise to,
Mm.
me being the person I am,
Mm.
she has a very eclectic mind. Like
Yeah.
I think I come up with some crazy shit. She comes up with things where I go, how does your mind work like that? But she had like a menu that was structured to seem like it was so much stuff.
Mhm.
But realistically, on the like, we did a lot. There was a lot of prep work ahead of it that had to like go into it. But like the dish would come together effortlessly
Yeah.
when we were putting everything together, that it just made time go. And she was the one that instilled that whole thing. Like, for remember what it's like to be a line cook.
Yeah.
Is when you're the one writing these menus, you don't want to screw your cooks up, because
Yeah.
then that screws everything up. You know,
For
so
sure.
one thing, like you said, is a system. If one cog in the machine goes down, like if it's the hostess going down
Mhm.
because they got phones or tablets not working, if
Mhm.
it's, you know, servers got this or that, like it
Mhm.
just cascades down. At some point, it's going to hit, and you don't want to be that restaurant where, you know, the drinks come out after your food hits the table,
Mhm.
or, you know, the server didn't show up for 20 minutes and I've been waiting, and now, or the infamous, you know, ghost ticket that never got to the
That's
kitchen.
nonsense, really.
I'm so sorry. The kitchen didn't get your ticket, which means someone screwed up, because the ticket got somewhere. It probably didn't get there when it was supposed to, or someone dropped the ticket.
Yeah.
But you know, there's always a rhyme or a reason. But the point is to be a effortless system that doesn't have those kind of problems. And there's always going to be some form of problem. Something's
Yeah.
going to happen. That's just what the industry is. You know, the hospitality industry is Newton's law.
Mm.
Like, it will go wrong, but you have to have systems in place that when that happens, you can bounce back quickly.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
you
And that's,
know,
circle back, that's something obviously here in the radio theory that we're really trying to hone in on early on before we even open.
yeah, it's just, you know,
And
everything has
those
to be
like
right.
experiences like water fire
Listen,
and
I
mentors like Angie and
water fires. I just read something that they're having trouble this year
oh really?
because it takes like a lot of money to do
Oh, I'm sure.
it. Once again, I'm not doing it justice because I just see it as wood on fire in the middle of the water, but it's apparently like a $2 million like budget or something like that they have to
Crazy.
do. And they can't get the support they need, so they might not be able to do the full year's worth. Or
Yeah.
I just,
Well, maybe
if you
down the
get an
road.
opportunity, Google water fire Providence.
Yeah.
You might find it
I mean,
interesting.
perhaps even down the road, we can do a podcast from Waterfire.
No.
You don't like it?
No, that sounds horrible.
We'll do a whole podcast episode just about
Whole
Waterfire.
podcast with bad opera music screaming in the background.
It's gonna be
We
great,
just,
and we'll just, you know what? I think it'll give you a new appreciation.
we could just have my kids home
That's true.
and let them run around, and they could be the opera music, and it would be just
Wow,
as
you're really
distracting.
down on Waterfire.
Listen, I worked a lot of them. And from a business standpoint, they did a lot of great business from water fires.
Oh, I'm sure.
As a person who worked them, it was like, it was not like it was one of those like, I'm glad I did it because it taught me how to move fast. It taught me how to work high volume. It just was, it was one of those nights where like when it was done, you feel like you conquered the world,
Yeah.
but during it, you hated every single person. Like, it's one of those, as restaurant people, we love people coming through the door
Yeah.
because that means we're making money.
For sure.
If we're making money, everyone's getting paid. You know, from the dishwasher to the managers, everyone's getting paid as long as people coming through the door. Waterfire, at times, there was moments where you were like, why are people coming here? Like, and it was just
There's a certain threshold, right? Where you're like, yes, this is exactly what I want. I want to sell product. I want to have people have a good experience. We want to make the money. Then there's a certain level of like overtired you get to at this end of a certain night where people keep walking through the door and you're like, I just wish that door would close and lock and no one would ever come through it again.
but it was also
until
like,
tomorrow.
it was like this factor of let's fill it up as many times as we can.
Yeah. So you're
Which is
just
like that
turning and
old school
burning.
mentality of owning a business where it's like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna make every dollar possible. So like we were considered a fine dining restaurant.
Mm.
In fine dining, going back to that word we learned last time, turns. A typical turn in fine dining is anywhere from 90 minutes, 2 hours to
Yeah.
2 hours. So an hour and a half to 2 hours
Yeah.
for fine dining. For a two top
Yeah.
is typically that time frame. The time changes for more people at the table.
Mm.
We had a hour policy for people to eat and get out.
So that's
So
just putting pressure, and just to speak to that, an hour policy, right? So that's putting
that
pressure on
means from
server,
sitting to they
to,
leave, they have an
and
hour.
you're running, like
And
you
we're
said,
running
30-minute
like
ticket time.
on a good that's
That's a
probably the
quick
first
ticket.
hour. So
Now
it's
you're looking
like
at servers to get the orders in within the first 5 minutes. You're looking for the order to get in to get that process done in under and a half an hour. Give them basically 20 minutes to eat and then leave.
yeah, it's just like once first of all, the experience is out the door.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
You're
we
rushing
would
them out.
even limit the menu, but still realistically, you can not unless you put one item on the menu and it's coming out of a chafing dish,
Yeah.
it's really not gonna do anything for you. So like it was just like this like, why are we killing ourselves to this point?
Yeah.
Like we're on the line chugging jugs of orange juice so we don't pass out. And then like you're at that point of like my mom talks all the time. She hates it because I grab stuff out of the oven with as you probably do with no glove
Yep.
or no towel. And she's like, why do you do that? Like, and there was a point, and water fire was that point for me where, as any cook will tell you, there is a point when you were so busy, you had two options. I could burn this food and have to start over, or I might burn my hand, but I might be fast enough to get it where I could drop it before it does damage
Yeah.
to get better, like to get it out of here. And we've all been there. And water fire was like that every
100%.
5 minutes where it was like, I'm going to burn myself, but I'd rather burn myself and not have to recook table 16 because they've been here for 45 minutes and I've been getting screamed at to get this plate out for the last 20. Like,
Yeah.
it's just one of those things. But like, you look back and it's like, all right, chef did her point and did her job to make this menu that made sense, but the systems weren't making sense
Yeah.
for the output the restaurant was doing. So that,
Yeah.
that 1 hour policy was already detrimental to everything. And there's
Yeah,
no
and that creates, especially for a night like that where there's a lot of influx of new business, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people that maybe have never been there before, and that's something that we're taking heavy consideration on what we're doing. That's why it's so big that first year for the being open, because it's all new business.
Yeah.
So when you think about that, there's a lot of influx, and their first and only experience is, fast pace, not the ambiance or the creative experience that maybe the restaurant typically gives, and then they're being shoved out so you can get a new table in. And that just creates that memory of like, well, I'm never going back there. They pushed me out in an hour.
Oh, they would come back. I don't get it. I don't get it. But I also feel like that was the area, like every restaurant was doing it.
Yeah.
Like it's part of the water fire experience.
Yeah.
You didn't get a restaurant experience, but you got the water
fire.
fire.
Yeah. So yeah, when it comes to creating like our restaurant experience, I think that's something that we're pushing for too, is to create an experience and not have that thrown out the window, no matter how busy we get. We're trying to create a system and a setup so that people can come in and enjoy the whole experience without feeling rushed, without feeling, pushed out or cast aside for more table turns,
Going back to my Disney days, it's a show.
It's a show. That's what it's all about.
You have on stage and you have off stage, but the show carries on both sides. So it's a show.
I appreciate Disney for all of this show.
So much. Disney is the reason why I've been so successful in my career.
They gave you a really good face, all right?
I took all the books and I ran with them. No. But it's actually funny when you talk about it too, because like a lot of this stuff's not secrets. Like I learned there's a building in Florida right behind Magic Kingdom called Disney University, where they actually hold workshops where other companies come to learn Disney ways of doing things.
That's so cool.
Like you've heard how many times have you heard the word guest recovery? That's a Disney word. It started there. So I'm not going to go into detail. There's books on the internet that you could buy. It tells you how to cheat Disney, and I am not a fan of it, so I'm not going to go into detail. But yeah, guest recovery was a Disney thing.
Wow.
So they know what they're doing.
Yeah,
they're a multi-billion-dollar company for a reason. It's
very obvious if they've gotten to a place,
and they know they're a multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah,
but that's in multiple different revenue streams. That's the resorts, the parks, and you got the entertainment side. So, but once again, it's paying attention to those little details. It's also very funny. as we talk about little details, because we have veered very, very far from what this podcast is supposed to be about. So we're definitely gonna
I
have
feel
to.
like everything. I feel like everything we talked about was good. I feel like we could probably take a whole podcast episode down the road and just talk about stories. Just
Yeah,
talk about our highs and lows throughout different restaurants and different kitchens. So maybe we'll save the rest of our stories for something like that. But I think everything we talked about, with water fire specifically, just having those systems in place and the creation of the menu. We think about things where it comes from what it's like to be a line cook. We always remember that. And when considering our menu, some things are prep heavy to make our lives a little easier on the execution side when that ticket comes through, and other things we will sacrifice a little speed to be able to get the type of dish we want out.
and I just want to like clarify when we say things like prep heavy,
Mm.
that doesn't mean like we're cooking and reheating.
No,
Because I know a lot of people sometimes they hear that.
I
That's
hear
the
that.
first thing
That
they.
is
Oh, you
exactly.
you pre-cook first of all, there's a word for that. It's not prep we use in the industry. It's called sandbagging. And
Yes.
oh, I cannot tell you how like angry that word makes me.
Mhm.
I have worked at many places that have sandbag, and I've threatened cooks to get out of my kitchen for doing that.
Oh yeah.
Sandbagging is a term that we use when you are loading up on items to get ahead. So that way, when you get busy, you don't have to, some places like steakhouses will do it and they'll cook like a bunch of medium steaks to medium rare. So they take like 5 minutes on a medium.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, it never works that way.
There's
It's
there's a
just,
line. There's a line between, being conscious of your prep and being able to set yourself up for success while not being detrimental to the product.
yeah, like I've been there when
Yeah.
I'm on grill and I'm getting smacked in the face and I might not remember every ticket. That's the chef screaming, "Oh, you got this many, this came in, this came in,"
Yeah.
and I'm like, I'm just gonna drop two more steaks because I might be behind one. And at the end of the night, if I got one steak left over, whoop de do. But when I work with people, and I'm sure you have, where they've dropped 20 steaks,
Oh yeah. It's
and it's just like, oh well, I can use this for this, and I just want to punch you in the face because like people are paying for an experience. They're paying for you to have the technical skills that are needed for
Yeah.
you to execute this dish. And if you have to sandbag it, what is the point of going?
Exactly. There's
Like,
no point in doing the dish
no,
if you're gonna say
you're
that.
just giving me
And
fancy hungry man at this point. Yeah.
exactly. And it's kind of like, I don't know. It's an important thing to be, like you said, consistent. Consistency is the biggest thing within the restaurant industry. You want consistency in experience and in quality. And if you're not going to do it right every time, there's
Don't
no
do it.
point in doing it.
Just don't do it.
And there's an egotistical way of looking at that, because there's the chefs that are like, if it's not perfect, we throw it away. Now, I don't know if that's the best way to go about it. I think
I'm not gonna lie, if it's not
if it's
up
not
to
up to the
standard,
standard,
I am not serving it. You know what I
100%.
mean? You've seen me
Oh, for sure.
throw plates back and not actually physically throw them, but be like, no, we're not. Give me another one. Let's work it right now because
Yeah.
it's not up to like this standard.
Yeah.
Especially in like we came from like the brunch world, so
Yeah.
a color on egg is garbage. Like,
Oh, for sure.
you know what I mean? You don't give me an omelet that's
You get an
brown.
extra 5 seconds on the cook, and it sits in the window for a minute. And now your easies are medium. It's like,
Yeah.
cool. I need new ones right away.
Exactly, and
It's
it's one
such
of
a
those
small window, especially for breakfast.
or even that. Like I remember Angie thing used to be. I used to be scared to work grill,
Mm.
and Angie would force me every single time. But like her thing, and like it sticks for me to this day, is like if a steak comes in, it has to be cooked evenly on both sides. Like I can't stand when I get a steak and you could tell they cooked on one side,
Yeah.
and it's like,
Cooked it
oh,
to
there's
see.
pink, and it's like, yeah, it's pink on the bottom 1/3, and the rest is like
And you
well
flipped
done.
it just to get a sear, and you
Like
threw it out.
it's having that extra. And I used to always tell people like, if you're gonna do this and you actually care, like I don't care if you didn't write the menu, I don't care if the dish is not yours. Any line cook who actually gives a damn about what they're doing, there should be a sense of pride that you executed that dish.
Yeah.
Even if the guest doesn't have a clue who you are, you should have a sense of pride in yourself to be
Yeah.
like, this dish came from my station. Oh, chef, just so you know, table such and such said the pasta on their dish was blah 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 blah. Like I took that to heart.
Oh, every time.
Good, bad, or indifferent. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I always tell people like, if you don't have that like sense to be able to do that, find the one person in your life you do not want to disappoint. You know, for me, it was my grandmother. Like, my grandmother loved me to death. She would praise me to death. But God, like if I did something wrong, she would be fine, but I would be hurting because she's like, "It's okay, baby." I'm like, "No," like she was that person. So like for me, it was like every dish I would have to put up had to be good enough for her.
Oh yeah.
And like that's how I would always visualize. So most of the time, I never got food sent back because I would catch the shit before the chef had a chance to tell me that's garbage. You know what I mean? Like I would look at it and be like, they'd be like, "How long on it?" And it's like that infamous 5 more minutes, chef, as I'm throwing the pan away and starting another one and hoping it's done in 5 minutes. But as chefs, as cooks, and I don't care like how far you are in your career, I don't care from down from the prep cook who's just peeling potatoes to the executive chef of the restaurant, like everyone has to be on that same accord of like quality
Yeah.
and consistency. Like it doesn't make sense because like
Yeah, you gotta have
I leave the look, you know me, I look at you like
yeah,
you know I'm
there's
going to send this back. Why would you
100%.
even put this in
There's
front?
so many moments where we've been on the pass or I go on the pass and I just see something hit the window and I'm like, this should have never I should have never seen.
Just
I would have been embarrassed. Oh, that's true. I would have been embarrassed to send that out. I would have been embarrassed to be like for me as a line cook, if I send something up that I know is below my quality, why am I doing it?
and
I'd
that
rather
goes
take
back
the
to
extra
like
time.
guest experience because
Exactly.
like any guest in the world, like everyone wants their food in a timely manner.
Yeah.
But if I gave the guest an option of your food's supposed to be out in 15 minutes,
Mm.
give me 5 more for 20 to have a perfect dish.
Or
Or
eh,
let me send out a dish at 15 minutes that's horrible
you
that now
just
you
don't
now need
believe
to
it.
send back.
You
And now
don't
give
do it.
me another. It's not going to be 15 minutes because now it's stuck somewhere.
Yeah.
So maybe 15 to 20 minutes for me to give you a new dish. Any person would tell you they can take that extra 5 minutes to make sure their first dish is perfect.
Yeah. That's why
Because
you
like
need to
now
do it.
you just ruined the experience in total. Like
Yeah.
even if the second dish comes out perfect, I still have that. Well, my first steak was wrong, or my
Yeah.
first dish was wrong, or like it's always it's first impressions.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same on everything. Like from the moment they open the door to walk into the establishment, you are now setting the precedence for the rest of their meal.
Yeah.
From the host, you're now setting the precedence for them to meet their server. From the server, you're now serving the precedence for them for the rest of
Drink.
their meal, their
Yeah.
drinks, and their food from the moment they leave. Like
Mhm.
every single thing we do has to matter.
Yeah.
Like there's no point of it that can't matter.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times people tell I never ever forget I had a Chef Mulaney. He used to tell us all the time, he goes, every time I go in a restaurant, you know how I know if it's a good restaurant or a bad restaurant. He's like, I go in a restaurant and I go, where's the bathroom? And he was like, you know why I asked that question? Because 9 times out of 10, the bathroom's right next to the kitchen. So I asked where the bathroom is. They point me to the bathroom. I walk to the bathroom. I go past the bathroom. And I go to the kitchen door and I kick that motherfucker in. And he was like, and I just kick it like I own it. And I just look around. If there's something that I don't like, I walk the hell out of that place. He was like, because if, and he was like, tell us stuff like that. But it's true. Like, you can tell from how a restaurant is, like, realistically, you can tell a good restaurant from a bad one just from the bathroom. Because if the
Oh yeah.
bathroom's disgusting, that is the easiest place to keep clean.
Yeah.
If they ain't taking the time to make sure the bathroom's clean, 9 times it's in the kitchen ain't that bad, much better.
Yeah.
And like, my family will tell you, we go to a restaurant, I need to sit with my back to the kitchen if it's next to us,
Mhm.
because I will not pay attention to
You're
anything coming
staring
out of
at
your mouth.
everything in the kitchen.
I will be staring at the kitchen.
I know
But
open kitchens are like the biggest nightmare for anyone I'm having food with or sitting down with.
they're also a nightmare for working.
Everyone's just staring at you.
I just I hate open kitchens. I'm too vocal for open kitchens,
Fair.
which is fine because I remember I was working at one restaurant and I would rarely lose my shit on the line because it's an open kitchen. Like the kitchen was in the middle of the dining room.
Yeah.
And I would sit there and be like, X, Y, and Z, this is happening. All right, you come with me and I'll take them in the back. We'll have a little conversation come back. And like everybody was screwing up that day. And I like lost my shit. I'm right on the line. And I turn around and there's just two old people, this couple standing there, and they're just right behind me. And I'm like, fucked up. So I go over to like apologize and offer them stuff. I'm like, can I get you an appetizer? Blah. And the lady was like, no, it's fine. It's just like the TV. And I was like, okay, I'm still gonna send you an appetizer because you shouldn't have seen that.
Yeah.
But I think we have reached that point where,
Maybe we have just maybe eating too much.
yeah, I know
We definitely we got off topic a little bit.
well, we knew this was gonna be an awkward, like not awkward, but a crazy podcast just based off the amount of times the blooper reels will be coming
The
for
blooper reels.
the
Ooh,
intros,
definitely check
but
those out on Instagram.
as you can see, when we talk food and restaurant, we have a lot of passions and get lost. So I think we are going to end this here.
Yeah.
Hopefully you learned some things about our menu. I think we gave a good amount of information, not as much as we had planned to, but
Yeah, we definitely
it was a
did
good
job.
conversation.
Stop. Yeah,
It's a great
it's great.
conversation. That's what this is about. Is you
It's all
guys understanding not just our concept, but who we are as people personally, and also like what it's like behind the scenes with chefs and restaurant tours and all that fun stuff. So we'll have hopefully more information about the restaurant and where we are in the process on the next podcast. But
Yeah, we got some exciting things coming up in the next couple of weeks, and we'll keep you updated the next time we talk to you. That's a wrap on our deep dive into crafting the menu for the ravioli theory. I hope you enjoyed hearing about the creative process, the inspirations behind our dishes, and how we've worked to honor tradition while embracing innovation. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of this journey. Your support means the world to us, and we're excited to keep sharing more of our story with you as we continue this adventure. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps us reach more listeners and keeps us motivated to bring you more of these behind-the-scenes insights. And be sure to follow us on Instagram at The Ravioli Theory for the latest updates, exclusive content, and a closer look at what's happening behind the scenes. We've got a lot of exciting things on the horizon, and we can't wait to share them with you. Thanks again for listening. We'll catch you in the next episode of The Ravioli Theory, the podcast.